Hello there gamers, and welcome back to another review sort of video. Today I'm going to be doing a sort of analysis on the game Life is Strange. Now I've referenced this game here or there on the channel, but never really talked about it in great detail. Life is Strange is a story-based game which can almost be associated with sort of interactive movie type games in the same vein as Detroit Become Human. But I'd argue that Life is Strange develops its own sort of gameplay style. This gameplay does adapt over various games, but it definitely has its own sort of style. Before I continue with the review though, I should probably mention, don't watch this video, or especially don't play this game, if you are rather young. And while I have tried my best to censor it mostly in this video, it's probably best to sort of stay away from this game if you are either sensitive to dark themes or are under 14. But with that being said, let's get into it. The story here is as follows. You play as a girl named Max Caulfield, and one day you have a vision of a storm. This storm looks very deadly and you should probably get away from it. She then wakes up in class as usual and oh wow, it looks like it was all a dream. She heads down to the bathroom when all of a sudden some maniac comes in named Nathan Prescott. Nathan is then greeted by a blue-haired girl and they begin talking. Nathan Prescott then takes out a gun, and I probably can't show the footage because YouTube will demonetize me, and tries to shoot this girl. But that's when you discover you have time travel abilities. And all of a sudden you're back in class. It is then your job to go back to the bathroom and save the girl from being shot. See what I mean about the dark themes? Yeah, we're just getting started. You later find out that the girl who almost got shot was your friend from when you were 13, Chloe Price. She's definitely the most interesting character here, and you see loads and loads of her backstory, but we'll get into that later. You basically hang out for the rest of the first chapter until you go up to a cliff, and then you have the same vision of the storm again, so I guess it wasn't a dream. You then find out that Arcadia Bay, the town, is going to be wiped out in 5 days by this hurricane. It's now your job to try and save Arcadia Bay. The next chapter begins and you have to convince Chloe that you have time travel powers. Eventually she is convinced. The next chapter is pretty much just them hanging out a bit more. You then find out that Victoria Chase, who is sort of the mean girl, is bullying a girl called Kate Marsh. Victoria published an embarrassing video of Kate at a party, which has led to some feud. Now I'm gonna have to try and go into as little detail as possible with what happens to Kate, but okay, so you guys seen The Incredibles? You know that bit where Mr. Incredible gets cancelled? Yeah, like take that, and instead of some generic dude, the one who sues Mr. Incredible, that's Kate Marsh, although Kate Marsh doesn't try and sue Max. Basically, yeah, I think you get what I mean. Max has to save Kate. Next we enter the first sort of plot hole-ish kind of thing. By the looks of it, Max uses the world and stops time. This gets Max to go onto the roof and talk to Kate. Now most people end up saving Kate here, but unfortunately I did not. And man, this game really likes to shame me because I couldn't save her. Later on, Max finds a new ability where she can time travel using photos. Basically use some really annoying gimmick and you can go back in time to when a photo was taken. She uses this ability to try and save Chloe's dad, who had died years back. Eventually you do save Chloe's dad, but unfortunately when you go back to present day, Chloe is bound in a wheelchair. Yeah, it's kind of complicated, but it's basically that because Chloe's dad didn't die, Chloe got a car and I guess crashed it. So eventually you end up just going back and changing everything back to the way it was. At first I was like, well, why did this chapter even need to exist then? This feels like a bit of a waste of time. But later, the reason that this chapter exists is because it creates the whole photo time travel gimmick, which is important later on. Chloe and Max then do some investigation into finding Rachel Amber. Oh, yeah, I didn't tell you. Basically, Chloe's friend Rachel Amber recently went missing and people are looking for her. Or really, the only people who are looking for her are Chloe and Max. You later find out that Nathan Prescott's family have a secret underground lair / bunker thingy. As they are leaving, Chloe finds Rachel's body. Now, I guess this is a sad moment, but I can't tell whether it's sad in the same way that the developers wanted you to feel. Because, like, I feel sad for Chloe here because of what she's going through. She was really convinced that they were going to find Rachel and everything was going to be fine and dandy. But, of course, now this can't happen. But if the developers' intentions were to make you feel sad for Rachel, that doesn't really work. Because we don't know anything about Rachel. All we know is she was Chloe's friend. But whatever, this was still a sad moment. Later on, you're doing some more exploring and digging when all of a sudden, you are captured by none other than Max's teacher, Mr. Jefferson. Now, here in the final chapter, and I do gotta say, there's a lot of unnecessary filler in this chapter, and I feel like it drags on for quite a long time. Not necessarily too boring, it just feels like it could have been shortened down quite a lot. Which is exactly what I'm going to try and do now. You keep messing around with the photo time travel ability, messing up everything, going back, and then messing up, then going back, then messing up, until eventually you manage to fix things. Mostly. You eventually fix things so Mr. Jefferson is put to justice, never to be seen again. Oh wait, yeah, we still have the storm to worry about. You look outside, and oh damn, yeah, the storm's going down. Oh hey, Chloe's back. Well, what do we do here? Then a bunch of random stuff happens for 20 minutes until eventually we get to the big climax. Eventually you have to make a big decision. Do you let the town be wiped out by the hurricane, or do you sacrifice Chloe, which will stop the storm somehow by going back in time and making it so she wasn't alive? I don't know. It's basically, long story short, because you've been messing with time so much, that's why the storm's happening. So basically, if you went back in time and then not went back in time after that, that would fix the storm. But that would also mean Chloe is dead. I ended up sacrificing Chloe just because I decided that's probably the most interesting ending. Like, imagine if this was a movie. Of course she would die. And then we get a very emotional end with Chloe's funeral. Or at least, I did in my ending. I don't know how many endings there are. There's probably only 2, to be honest. The next bit I'm going to be talking about is the main gameplay. Now, many people complain about the gameplay here, but I personally think it's perfectly fine and appropriate for the game. Like, you don't exactly play this game for its gameplay, you play it for the emotional story and the experience. You feel like the entire story is in your hands. It makes it more emotional and impactful when you actually make a mistake or when something misfortunate happens, like a character dying. Like, when you don't save Kate, it's rough. The game really shames you for it, as I mentioned previously. The basic gameplay is very simple. You just walk around and interact with things, which progresses the story. Now, of course, you're assigned to do specific things, but a lot of people say the gameplay is repetitive, and while that may be true, you never really focus on the specific actions when you're playing. It almost feels like you're actually in the game. You feel like you are the main character, which leads to characters. Now I'm going to be real here for a second. Max Caulfield is not a good character. I mean, yeah, she has a personality, but she feels really generic at times, and she's probably the least interesting character. I mean, you see none of her backstory at all. This may be so the player feels like they are the main character, but I still would like to find more about her backstory. She feels like a supporting character sometimes. However, Chloe is an amazing character. We see loads of her backstory and get to know her really well. The other characters are also written quite well, if your opinion. I may hate Nathan Prescott down to the bone, but even I gotta admit, he's a well-crafted character. However, I do find Mr. Jefferson a bit lacking here. We don't see any of his past or really anything to do with him, which makes his intentions and motivations not really that clear. It's mostly boiled down to, he's insane and manipulative. So to wrap things up here, this game is absolutely phenomenal and will go down as one of my favourite games of all time. And yeah, people have pointed out its flaws, and I think it's perfectly reasonable to be put off by some. But I think they're all pretty easy to look past and still enjoy the game. It never felt boring, I was constantly hooked. Some puzzles were a bit tedious, but there's always online walkthroughs. Some people don't like the tone and vibe of this game, but even you gotta admit, that doesn't make the game bad, it just isn't for you. That being said, I truly do love this game and would recommend it to everyone. Everyone 14 and up.